I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. You know, sometimes people make bad choices. They damage other people's stuff, and when the system works right, well, they're held accountable. But you may have noticed in the recent years the system does not always work right, which brings us to a repeat rock thrower in Gresham, a man charged with breaking windows in at least 11 businesses. That's our big story tonight. The accused rock thrower, not exactly a criminal mastermind. Gresham police caught him 4 different times. Yeah, he's accused of throwing rocks through business windows in downtown Gresham 4 different times over the span of just 8 days. 3 of the 4 times he was arrested, he was taken to jail. But listen to this, he got out quickly. He was probably back in Gresham faster than the officers who had to drive him to Portland for the booking. More on that in a moment. But first, let's take a look at the damage. This is the historic part of downtown Gresham, the latest target of the rock attacks, which happened twice on the 4th of July. Again, at least 11 businesses had windows broken in the attacks over 8 days. The president of the Business Association said the targets are not giant corporations.
Most of the businesses that were affected are family owned, and so the difference between something that's unforeseen, such as this circumstance, can mean the difference between a positive and a negative month for them. So it directly affects our owners and our community.
Dan Anderson is one of those business owners. He's had Anderson Martial Arts here for 38 years. 3 rocks flew through his windows.
Yeah. We have all 3 rocks.
And absolutely for our businesses, it's frustrating because you can't help but wonder if he were to have remained in jail, if some of these things could have been prevented.
You know, if I were in charge of the jail, the key would be in the Willamette River somewhere.
So you know how he feels about that. We also found damage at Barley Sprout Pizza. Owner Dave Schonk said the shattered window there will likely cost him $1,000 or more. He said he hopes the rock thrower gets the help that he needs, and he wanted to thank the community.
There's been a lot of support from people around reaching out and trying to help us, so appreciate that.
It is wonderful indeed when friends and strangers show up to help after something like that. Too bad it's needed. Now let's turn our focus to the court system and take a closer look at the alleged rock thrower's brief visits to jail. According to the Multnomah County's District Attorney's Office, the rock thrower was first arrested June 27th for breaking windows in the 900 block of Northeast Hogan Drive. He was given a criminal citation but not booked into jail. Then 2 days later, on June 29th, Gresham police arrested him again, this time for breaking windows in the 1600 block of Northeast Division. And this time he was taken to jail, but was released 2.5 hours later without conditions before he was arraigned. The DA's office said that release happened as part of the operating rules set up by the court's presiding judge. Those rules were required after the passage of Senate Bill 48 as part of a statewide effort to reduce the use of bail to hold defendants. The DA's office also said the court's risk assessment tool deemed the rock thrower a low risk in failing to appear for his court dates and a low risk to reoffend. I should mention the court's public information officer emailed me saying that it's not the court's risk assessment tool, but rather a tool agreed to by the DA's office and others in the system. Either way, guess what? It was wrong about our rock thrower. He did fail to appear, and he was charged with breaking more windows. On July 4th at 2:25 in the morning, witnesses called 911 after seeing the same guy breaking windows in several businesses in downtown Gresham. He was arrested and charged with multiple counts of criminal mischief and booked into jail. But then, just 5 hours later, he was released because he was deemed a low risk under that same order from the presiding judge. Come on. About 12 hours later on the same day, 4th of July, Gresham police arrested him again, this time for breaking windows at the business on East Powell Boulevard. This time, it actually looks like maybe he was going to be held. The court's offender risk score still showed that now he should be released. But a different presiding judge's order overrode that. That order says that defendants charged with 3 property crimes or more can be held until their arraignment. This was his 4th arrest for a property crime, so case closed, right? Not exactly. Turns out there's a shortage of public defense attorneys these days. I know you've heard that. It's true. The court could not find our rock thrower an attorney, and so, yes, he was released without supervision or bail and is, well, who knows where he is tonight. And that is a big problem. So here's my opinion on this. How many windows does it take? How many? I suspect a number of business owners in downtown Portland have wondered that themselves over the last few years. But tonight, we're talking about Gresham and a system that is seriously broken. In my opinion, there's no good reason for that person to be out on the streets tonight. He should have been locked up somewhere, either getting a mental health evaluation if that's the issue, or sitting in a jail cell to think about what he'd done. And the fact that he's somewhere out there tonight on his own, free to do whatever he wants, that is astounding to me. Do we really have to wait and wonder what's going to happen next? And I know, some of you might say, look, in the big scheme of things, breaking windows is not the end of the world, and this person has rights that should be protected. Okay, but what about the rights of the business owners in Gresham? What about the small business owners that sweat and worry and work hard to make a profit? What about them? What about their rights? The reason we're highlighting this case is because it points to a flaw in the criminal justice system. It's broken. It should not be so inflexible and one size fits all. It should be intelligent so that someone like this can be held after the second arrest, not released every single time, including after the fourth arrest. Come on. I often hear from viewers that you are fed up with crime, and I'm with you. Many of you think the system is broken or overwhelmed or both. It needs to change. Sadly, this is one more example that you are not wrong. And that's too bad. At least that's my opinion. You don't have to agree with me, but you do have to share yours. Email us, will you? Let me know what you think. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail. The number is 503-226-5090. I really look forward to hearing from you. Now, let's talk about the homeless crisis and some news from federal court this week that greatly affects homeless policy all across the West Coast. There is a reason that police cannot simply arrest someone for camping on public property at any time of day. It's because of a key court ruling. So let's explain how we got here. The case is called Martin v. the City of Boise, as in Boise, Idaho. You've heard of it. And it's been used to fight camping restrictions in several cities on the West Coast. In 2018, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled a city cannot charge someone with a crime or give them a ticket for sleeping in a public space if there's a lack of shelter beds. In other words, nowhere else for that person to go. The judges declared that charging someone with a crime for sleeping outside when they have no other choice is really a violation of the Eighth Amendment, meaning it qualifies as cruel and unusual punishment. So, when there are headlines about camping bans, that Martin v. Boise ruling is often what legally stands in the way of enacting those. It's also a key component in Portland's daytime camping ban that hits the books tomorrow. In order to criminalize camping on public property with citations and the threat of jail time and fines, police need to prove that there are shelter beds available when the homeless person refuses to move their tent. They cannot just arrest them on the spot, and that's because of Martin v. Boise. And that brings us to the headline from this week. Yesterday, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals refused to rehear a case. The ruling stopped the city of Grants Pass, Oregon, from criminally punishing homeless people who sleep in public places when they have nowhere else to go. Last year, a three-judge panel from the Ninth Circuit said the city cannot enforce that camping ban. So the city appealed, asking for the full court to hear the case instead of just three judges. But according to yesterday's 155-page order, a majority of the court's 29 judges said no to a full court hearing. And now, according to the Oregonian, the lawyer representing Grants Pass says, no problem, the city's going to take the petition to the U.S. Supreme Court and ask them to review the case. It's worth noting that this case is taking a very similar path to that Boise case. Boise wanted the full court to review the ruling against it as well, but the Ninth Circuit rejected the idea. Then they brought it to the U.S. Supreme Court, which denied the petition to review its ruling, so it stands. So, will the Grants Pass case suffer a similar defeat in our nation's highest court? Well, time's going to tell, but there are a few passages from the recent 155-page order from the Ninth Circuit that are worth mentioning. The two judges who wrote the majority opinion said the Grants Pass camping ban indeed violates the Eighth Amendment, and their choice to not hear the case again is consistent with precedent. Okay, but a senior Ninth Circuit judge who was joined by 14 other judges did not mince words when he wrote a statement against this recent ruling. It is easy enough for us behind marble walls and sealed doors to dismiss the consequences of our decisions. But for those who call these communities home, who must live by the criminal violence, narcotics activity, and dangerous diseases that plague the homeless encampments buttressed by our decisions, the consequences of our judicial arrogation are harder to accept. The judge says the original Boise ruling invented a federal constitutional right to sleep on public property, and thinks the Eighth Amendment argument is wrongly applied when it comes to camping bans. Another Ninth Circuit judge who wrote his own dissent said the Boise and Grants Pass rulings, quote, use a misreading of Supreme Court precedent to require unelected federal judges to act more like homeless policy czars than as Article III judges applying a discernible rule of law. He went on to say the Boise ruling handcuffed local jurisdictions trying to respond to the homeless crisis, while the Grants Pass ruling, quote, now places them in a straitjacket. It's no secret the homeless crisis boiled over on the West Coast years ago, but it sure feels like tempers are starting to flare a bit in the federal courts. The two judges who wrote the recent majority opinion rebuffed those dissenting claims, saying they were mischaracterizing the rulings with exaggerations. They said their ruling does not allow homeless people to sleep wherever and whenever they want, saying that when there is space in shelters, places can ban sleeping anywhere in public. And if someone refuses shelter, that person can be punished. So, when you wonder about the legality and careful wording of Portland's camping ban, it's because of cases just like this one. Localities are forced to meander around the rulings and opinions to try and get a handle on the crisis on the streets. As far as the Grants Pass case is concerned, we're going to be watching closely to see if the U.S. Supreme Court decides to take up the case. It's a process that surely will not happen anytime soon. Still to come on the story, the Tunnel 5 fire in Skamania County continues to burn tonight and remains just 5% contained. We got a tour of the fire line today, and we'll chat with Chief Meteorologist Matt Zaffino about the shifting winds and what that means for firefighting efforts into the weekend. That's all coming up when the story returns. We continue to monitor the Tunnel 5 fire out in Skamania County, right along the bank of the Columbia River and just north of Hood River. The fire has slightly grown to just over 550 acres and remains 5% contained. Crews are still investigating a cause of the fire. Today we did get confirmation. Sadly, the 10 homes have been destroyed so far. There are still some level 3 go now evacuations right near the fire. Level 2 beset orders are in effect in areas to the east and west. Today, our team got a tour of the fire line along with a look at how crews are battling the flames. That includes images from a plane that gives a bird's eye view, helping firefighters be more strategic.
What you have here to the right and what is displayed on the screen is actually a Kodiak aircraft flying about 10,000 feet above us and capturing all kinds of different imagery to provide a near real-time picture here on the ground to the command team.
Washington's Commissioner of Public Lands was there for the fire line tour today, sharing a major concern for the rest of the season.
I will say right away, we are seeing and predicting this is going to be one of our toughest fire seasons to date for a number of reasons. It's hot and dry, and it's hot and dry in every single corner of the state.
Chief Meteorologist Matt Zaffino joins us now. Matt, I know this is not your first fire season. Same here. We both heard that warning many times. It's going to be the worst ever. What do you think?
You know, it's a good warning because hopefully it'll alert people like, hey, I need to be careful with my fire. But yeah, I mean, we joke about it in the news sometimes, like, hey, a new barbecue restaurant opened. What does that mean for the fire season, right? So,
Yes.
You know, we'll have to wait and see come the fall rains if indeed this was the worst fire season on record in Washington or any of the other western states. We do know it's dry. It's always dry. This is the middle of or the beginning, really, of our dry season. So it is good to be alerted that, hey, it could get really bad. But we'll have to wait and see. A lot of fires are started by humans, so predicting human behavior is virtually impossible.
Yep.
Many fires still started by lightning. We haven't had massive lightning outbreaks yet, but you know, the summer is still early. We could certainly see that the rest of July or August. Okay, as far as the Tunnel 5 fires specifically goes, we're looking to the west towards Hood River from our camera in the Dalles, about 20 miles east of Hood River. Conditions similar, 92 in the Dalles, winds out of the northwest at 17. Yes, it's dry. That's not good, but the wind is the real issue. That's the thing I'm really concerned about because the firefighters had a break for a couple of days where the winds were very light out in the gorge. Now that has changed. The winds in Hood River blowing about 20 miles an hour or so. There's the sustained wind over in the Dalles. So look at our wind model. We'll put some numbers to this. Here's Hood River. See where the yellow colors here, that bullseye, that's where we're seeing the strongest winds, and that's pretty much exactly where Underwood is, where the fire is burning. Notice the winds back off a little bit overnight, but not that much, staying sustained of about 18 miles an hour. That's a strong wind that will certainly have an impact on fire. And then in the afternoons, the winds pick up, sustained 25, 26 miles an hour, gusts as high as 30. And this is going to be the case not only tomorrow, Pat, but right on into the weekend. So I am concerned about the wind on the Tunnel 5 fire. They're increasing tonight. It's going to stay windy into the weekend. It'll be a little bit cooler. That helps, but still no rain and not much humidity either. Now, speaking of fire season, back in 2021, the folks at Climate Central did a study on, hey, what's happening with fire weather days? Is that changing as our climate changes? So they looked back from 1973 to 2020, and they looked at what they considered to be thresholds for fire weather days. And they looked at temperature. You had to have 2 consecutive hours where the temperature, the wind, and the humidity all met the threshold for dangerous fire weather conditions. And when they did that, they saw that for north central Oregon, which includes Hood River County, and yes, I know the Tunnel 5 fire is in Washington, but it's just across the river, so pretty much the same deal. For north central Oregon, we've seen an increase of 16 fire weather days since 1973. That's a lot, and that kind of goes with the experience that many of us have been noticing over the last several years with an increase in fires in the summer, especially early in the summer like this too.
And I know that, you say 25 mile an hour sustained winds. People don't realize that is a really strong wind.
Super good point. People generally tend to overestimate wind. So if it's blowing on you at let's say 20 miles an hour, people are like, wow, it's really windy. It's got to be blowing at least 30. Not the case. And the point being that a 20 mile an hour wind is really strong. A 30 mile an hour wind, a lot of people think it's like 40 or 50. So yes, it's a really good point, Pat, that a 20 mile an hour wind is strong and certainly has an impact on fire a lot. Hey, I got a couple of bonus items for you. You want to get into that? We have time?
Yes, a little bit of time.
Okay, so real
It's always
quickly,
worth it.
today is Aphelion Day. That means it's the day at which Earth is at its farthest point away from the sun. You may be thinking, what do you mean? It's the middle of summer. Well, if you're in the southern hemisphere, you go, yeah, it totally makes sense. It's the middle of winter, right? So the thing is this. Earth's orbit around the sun is not circular as it's depicted here. It's actually more of an oval, or what we call an ellipse. And we're at the point now, we're at the farthest point. Come the middle of winter, well, early winter, January, we'll be at our closest point. The difference, we're about 3 million miles farther away right now, which means the big solar storms that just happened this week on the sun will have to travel about another 3 million miles to reach Earth. But they look like they're headed our way. This is an illustration from NASA of what these solar storms look like. A couple of strong ones could spark the northern lights later this week or this weekend, Pat.
That'll be cool. Okay. By the way, it feels like we're kind of close to the sun right now.
It sure does. It's been hot.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. Up next on the story, our segment on Portland street response last night certainly got a few of you fired up. We'll show some of your thoughts on the program that appears to be at a crossroads when the story returns. Well, you had plenty to say about our Portland street response story last night. We brought you some background on the program itself and why it finds itself at a crossroads now that its champion in city government, Joanne Hardesty, is no longer part of city government. The big question now, according to Commissioner Rene Gonzalez, is the direction that the program goes. He's now in charge of it and says its mission needs to be more defined, and outgoing Fire Chief Sarah Boone says it's lacking the behind-the-scenes structure to make it work long-term. Many of you viewers were split when it comes to what exactly Portland Street Response should be doing on our streets. Just mental health work, hand out supplies to the homeless, maybe both? Kate wrote to us to say PSR should not be a social service agency. They should not give out tents, sleeping bags, or food. Leave that to the nonprofits. We need to remove the welcome mat by taking care of all the needs of people living on the streets of our city. But a viewer named Dan disagrees.
Sarah Boone just has a bunch of vague comments about what's going on, and maybe Portland Street Response doesn't belong under the Fire Bureau. I'm thinking that that their social service capabilities, handing out tents and sleeping bags, is a good thing. I was disappointed to get the chief's take on this, and the commissioner was the same way about how we need more supervision. We don't need more supervision. We need more boots on the ground and frontline workers.
And thanks to all of you for your opinions. Depending on which side you fall on, there's plenty of you that think Portland's street response is a step in the right direction. We heard from one person who serves as the director of a food and clothing pantry on Southeast 82nd. They said they have relied on Portland street response several times to help clients experiencing a mental health crisis. Writing, "It's been a real comfort to know that we have someone to call, besides the police, to help us peacefully mitigate these events. In my opinion, PSR has been a positive force in our neighborhood. When they respond, they are always professional and helpful. I would hate to see the city pull the plug on the program." Thousands of people have watched our segment on the KGW YouTube channel, by the way, with one of them writing in to say, "I think they should be mental health first responders. They were in such a rush to fix the problem. They have multiple people doing the same thing. That's not effective, nor is it cost efficient." If you missed the segment last night, head over to YouTube to find it now. Just find KGW News and then scroll down to the story section to find individual segments and full episodes. Well, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. But remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. Stick around now for the news at 6:30, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.